We can line up our artilleries and anti-air on one side of the city, and the enemy can be on the other side of the city. We can fake in an aircraft coming into the no-fly zone. Why is Russia so threatened by a no-fly zone in Ukraine? Why does Ukraine want a no-fly zone so bad? And what are no-fly zones? Okay, let's get into this. There's two sorts of context. You have a military no-fly zone, and you have a civilian no-fly zone. The civilian no-fly zone is very simple. Like, you can't take your aircraft and fly it over the White House unless you have permission. Even in Syria, back in 2014, there were no-fly zones for civilian aircraft from the United States because they were afraid anti-aircraft missiles would take out a civilian aircraft on accident. But military no-fly zones are actually sort of a new idea. This was only becoming a thing back in the 90s when they were putting no-fly zones on the Iraqi military during Desert Storm. And essentially, no-fly zones, the main purpose of this is to get military aircraft to not take out civilian populations. Because unfortunately in this world, there are people who use their military to control their populations. This was happening in Iraq. Now, what are the issues with the no-fly zone? It sounds awesome. We're not going to take out civilians. Well, Russia right now is all over the news, and everybody is saying they are taking out civilian populations. However, the only people not getting this news is, of course, Russia. And Russia, they are in no way, shape, or form reporting that civilians are being taken out. There is no way to fully prove if Russia is taking out civilian populations on purpose. However, there seems to be indications that a lot of civilians are being taken out. We gotta take this with a grain of salt because no-fly zones can also be very dangerous. But how do you actually implement a no-fly zone? This is where it gets even more confusing. A no-fly zone can really only be implemented if somebody can stop the opposing force's air force. And here's what I mean by this. If we tell Russia, you cannot fly your aircraft anymore all over Ukraine, who's gonna stop them? That would mean that someone from NATO, United States, Germany, France, that would mean somebody would have to step up, use their military resources, and stop Russia. That's why NATO has been extremely hesitant to put up a no-fly zone in Ukraine, because that would mean we are going to war against Russia, and Russia knows this. That's why they keep saying, if you implement the no-fly zone, we are going to take it out on you in one shape or another. So that's why we got to be very careful in implementing no-fly zones. The other thing is this. No-fly zones can actually be even more dangerous on civilian populations because of this. Imagine we put a no-fly zone over a city. That means no military aircraft can fly into the city. However, they never said anything about an artillery strike, and also, we can line up our artilleries and anti-air on one side of the city, and the enemy can be on the other side of the city. We can fake in an aircraft coming into the no-fly zone, and then we can start getting fake missiles flying over populations to try tricking the enemy. In fact, Iraq was doing this to the United States during the Desert Storm. So that's why no-fly zones, in theory, just like communism, sound great. However, they never end up working. That's why everybody is super hesitant to not put a no-fly zone over Ukraine, because how are we going to enforce it? And Ukraine knows if they keep asking and asking and asking, and they keep showing all these civilians getting taken out and blaming it on Russia, hopefully they will get the no-fly zone, which means military aircraft from NATO will come into Ukraine and actually start fighting the Russians in the air in case anything happens.